and welcome to the Oddity Archive, the show that gets into your heart. Kinda like how mold gets into your lungs, uninvited. So anyway, here we are, slightly belatedly kicking off a new season of audiovisual detritus, and slightly belatedly because my little between season project turned out to be a real unintentional nasty whopper. So anyway, over the last several weeks now, I've been trying to add yet another wackadoodle old video format to the archive arsenal, and I think I just ticked off Mother Nature. But the format in question would be the EIAJ Type 1 half-inch open reel videotape format. And yeah, I know these were used for other formats as well, but it's still appropriate. But anyway, this is our oldest videotape format yet. So this one can get us as far back as 1970. And in other words, we are now officially only one format away from hitting the recognized first so-called home video format, and that would be the CV format, introduced in 1965. But as for today, I'm, of course, going to be unleashing another one of my little pseudo-documentaries on you lovely folks. And it's going to be on my trying to fix up a Sony AV-3600 black and white videocorder, and also my dealings with these freaking tapes. So this was one of those years where the between-season break was a genuine fait accompli. I have been sitting on this unit since March, and I was fairly excited about potentially getting this thing going again. It was just an issue of having the time to actually work on it. So now the backstory. I bought this for, I think it was $70, plus a near equal amount for shipping, and very crappy shipping at that. But I bought it off of a self-proclaimed documentary filmmaker who didn't seem to have any IMDb credits or anything. But he said he bought it at some kind of surplus liquidation thing. And this was indeed initially owned by the Nebraska Public Power District, or effectively Nebraska taxpayers. But he claimed that it played video okay, but he was only working with silent footage and by turn had never tried out the audio. So I, of course, interpreted this as, okay, the video head is probably decent, but the audio is probably screwed up in some way, shape, or form. But unless it's a circuit board sort of thing, it shouldn't be too tough to deal with. Now, I have no idea when or if his documentary was ever made, but it became obvious real quick that he had never done any real work on this unit, and I think I'm rightly skeptical about the very existence of this documentary. But anyway, this set in motion a very long, frustrating period of work on this, which, spoiler alert, remains unresolved.
No! No! No!
Before I start running my little documentary, which actually exists, this is the Sony AV-3600 half-inch open-reel videocorder, as it's called, and it records in the EIAJ Type 1 format, or within the realm of Sony, sometimes referred to as the AV format, and I'm guilty of generically referring to it as the AV format. It's just easier. I'm sure I'll take some heat for that. But anyway, I haven't found any real concrete dates on this, but what I'm reading the most online is that the EIAJ Type 1 standard was standardized in 1969, and the first compatible machines rolled off the line in 1970. And my best guess is that the Sony AV series was discontinued around 1977 or 78. So the law of averages would put this particular unit, which I couldn't find any identifying marks on, to sometime around 1974. Now, this rectifies two major issues from Sony's prior CV, or consumer video format, and just prior half-inch machines in general. One being that the CV series didn't have tracking control, so tapes were all too often not interchangeable between machines, even if it's the same format. Well, the AV series indeed has controllable tracking, and skew for that matter, but again, it's a totally different format. Now, the other rectified issue was that there was no real half-inch tape standard at the time. So, for example, Panasonic and General Electric made some half-inch VTRs, videotape recorders, during the late 60s, but they all hit the same potholes as the Sonys. Now, this is still a pretty basic machine. The real gold standard within the realm of the Sony AV series was the AV-8650, which has color and editing capabilities. This unit was just the basic black and white playback and recording unit. Alright, let me just give a quick rundown of the back of the machine here. So, to me, this is a simultaneously basic and, coming from the perspective of a somewhat younger person, rather oddball selection of in and outputs. So just like my Sony U-matic, we're dealing with composite video via UHF, aka PL259 ports, to which I've added my now customary pair of UHF to RCA adapters. I just took them off for this segment. Then we've got a 6-pin socket for TV and audio input for a presumably period Sony monitor. We've got an 8-pin socket for a presumably period Sony wired camera. And then it's a whole lot of 1/8-inch jacks. So in order, we've got the mic input, we've got the auxiliary input, aka line input, and then line output at the end of that trail. And then down in the corner here, we've got a truly old-fashioned RF output. So you can hook one of those little boxes with the sliding switch and the little devil's pitchforks, the kind you used to use to hook up your Atari to the TV. And then aside from that, this runs just on a generic extension cord. It just can't have the little bump over the top. But otherwise, yeah, just a normal old, presumably outdoor extension cord, despite this being kind of an indoor thing. And you don't have to sacrifice an outlet if you don't want to, or just run your TV through it, or come up with some freaky timer setup, whatever you want. So over the span of about 3 weeks, I replaced and rather poorly rebuilt the foam pieces that secure the reel tables within the lid. So when this is all together, everything is secured. And I also replaced 3 out of the 4 belts, the last belt being in good shape. It wasn't dry or cracked or stretched or anything. And also, if I attempted to replace that one, it would guarantee that the machine would need a total realignment that I just don't have the gear or know-how to execute. And then I also found that the machine had probably never been lubed, at least not since it originally left the factory. Everything in there was just totally dried out. And I also found all sorts of dust and debris down in the guts of the machine, so that had to be cleaned out. And I also found a fair amount of shredded newspaper down in there. And I can't help but wonder if somebody wasn't using that stuff to clean the machine back in the 70s and early 80s, complete with the ink on the pulp. And let's see, to boot, half-inch, especially Sony open-reel videotapes, are legendary for simultaneously going sticky and the lubricant on the back of the tape drying out. So on top of that, about half of the tapes in my possession were also moldy, so I had plenty of cleaning and lubing and baking and all to do. So now what you're going to see for the remainder of today's episode is a series of montages and guerrilla-styled segments going through the whole process of cleaning, lubing, troubleshooting, dealing with the tapes, and so on and so forth. And so with that, I now present to you Ben versus the Sony AV-3600, or lube that to me one more time. Alright, let's make sure I didn't screw anything up here. Still power's on. Rewind. Forward. Pause. Sort of. Fast forward. Okay, there's pause, if you want to call it that. Okay, I see what it did. Alright. Alright, well, I suppose we'll try a tape on it. Okay, at the very least, proof of concept here. So, tape deck, I'm also going to run it through the Videonics just for the time-based correction to my regular TV, and a whole lot of bumping. Alright, let's give it a go. And we're not spinning. Something flashed on screen, but now I gotta figure out why we're not spinning. Okay, I think I figured out what went wrong with this. The pin controller and the capstan were not meeting, but the whole mechanism, which runs almost to the head, just wasn't communicating, but I eventually tracked it down. See if I can actually get the camcorder down in there enough. There it is. I have it covered in grease right now. That part just wasn't really moving the way it should, so let me hit the forward button here. It'd be nice if my lovely camera would focus. So it's still not quite getting all the way there. It's about 2/3 of the way. But by the same token, when I hit the pin controller, or forward rather, it just about makes contact. Just enough room for tape to pass through there. So I guess I should give this another shot. Okay, so I've gone over to a CRT to avoid all the dropout stuff. And so, you know, we'll get it squiggles and all, but I have this working at least enough for proof of concept. However, I'm thinking this was recorded on a CV series deck, not an AV series deck. But all the ones I've got just simply don't say what they were recorded on. So you just kind of have to guess. So I've got sound and squiggles, and I get a flash of picture when I hit stop. So I will try and get this. I may have to slow it down in post. The pin controller is still being goofy too. But we have an episode of Johnny Carson.
Now we know that this card can't be your card. That would be cheating. However, it is a heart. Telling me your card was a heart.
So when I hit stop, you should get a brief flash of it.
But not only was it a
Of course, it would help if I had a little better aim.
and here comes the amazing part of the whole thing. This also represents exactly one half the value of the card you.
Yeah, hopefully you saw it there. So, we'll call it proof of concept. But yeah, definitely not Bible study. I think somebody tried to erase this and didn't quite get it right.
What a big, great.
All right, a little bit of a ramble here for you. So this is, I believe now, 6 days since the last time I tested this sucker out. And in that time, I'm up to replacing 3 out of the 4 belts now. The one I didn't do is the main capstan belt. But at the same time, it just didn't look like it needed it. It was still real good and taut and didn't have any lumps in it or cracks. All the others were, at the very least, loose, and in one case, just not really functioning. So most of what I've been doing since then is I've been doing a whole lot of tape cleaning, lubing, and baking in that order, and in some cases having to do it multiple times. And I have learned that 2 of my tapes were stored tails out, and one of those tails out tapes is inside out. So at the very least, I'm going to have to try and get my hands on another 7-inch take-up reel. But anyway, I got a 5-incher here ready to go, and I'm just hoping I haven't destroyed this machine. I've had to get very, very handsy with this sucker just to change the belts, and I've tried to clean and lube it some more. I mean, I've really done everything I can to this machine that I know how. So now it's just an issue of, did I kill it? And I got a new to me tape on there. No idea if there's anything on it at all, if there is, what format it's in. And otherwise, yeah. So I got the old CRT hooked up again. The only test I've done so far is just simply powering on the machine. And that much does happen. So I still get the snow. But I guess the only thing left to do now is to take a crack at this. Oh, and of course, yep, problems. It is just astounding how persnickety this stuff is. So it looks like my problem was I couldn't make this spin when I put it into play mode. Well, as it turns out, when I was installing the belt deep down in here, so not the counter belt, but the pulley underneath, I put one of the washers on out of order. And it's just a real tiny little thing, but it seemed to make all the difference in the world. So just for a very, very brief demonstration here, put into play mode. Now it spins. So let me put this back together and we'll give it another shot. Okay, ready for round 2. Can't say I have my hopes too high, but let's see what happens. A little inspiration, maybe. Yep, same crap, different day, but I seem to have better luck the deeper into the tape I get. So let me take a quick cut here. I'll advance it a little by hand and we'll pick it back up. Okay, so even though I think it's the wrong format, at least I know something is on this tape. And spoiler alert, I've already tried it. And at least I haven't destroyed anything. Still have to be kind of nasty with the pinch roller though.
Oh, 4.5. You have to have fun when you're doing
And I'll
these
still get that
exercises.
quick flash when I hit stop. Just like that. So if nothing else, at least I didn't kill it. Now the hunt is on for something that's actually in the AV format. All right, I've got another bit of a ramble here for you, so try and stick with me. Not always the easiest thing to do. So it is now another day past the last little bit that I shot, and I have been through my whole box of tapes, and either they are all, aside from the blanks, in the CV format, or there is something very, very wrong with my machine. But we won't know until I do a record test, which of course I was going to do anyway. So, let me discuss this a bit. I learned that I have to be pretty generous with the lube on the tapes. I wound up having to re-lube all the tapes that I did give an extra hit because I just didn't give it enough. And let's see here. We're going to, of course, do a record test, but I'm going to use, as I like to call it, BASF tape, BASF, because allegedly it has the best survival rate, and it's been moving pretty smooth. It hasn't really been choking or anything on me. So we got that in order. Now I have had to, I've made another discovery, and I've had to adjust things accordingly. So what I've learned since yesterday is I hadn't tried to plug anything in to this machine yet. And so obviously I tried to plug audio into the line input, or aux input as it's labeled, and there seems to be something wrong with that plug. There is signal, but it's incredibly weak and very, very noisy. Bad cap, who knows. But anyway, so to get around that, I'm plugging it into the mic input, but now we're dealing with mic level as opposed to line level. So I've had to add in line just my cheapy little Behringer audio mixer with the audio way down, just to try and attenuate the signal. And I have done little audio checks here, at least without actually recording, just to make sure that the levels are about where I think they should be, where they sound about right to my ear. At the very least, no clipping. So I'm going to do something a little special here. For one, barring anything very obviously wrong, I'm going to go ahead and record maybe this entire reel of tape. And I'm going to try and do something that would have been at least semi-possible at the time. So we're talking the AV format here, so what do you want to call that? Very late 60s through mid-late 70s. So if somebody did have one of these in the home and tried to use it to time shift TV programming, well, I can't really record anything from that period and get away with it here. So, but, a lot of UHF stations would have been showing reruns from the 50s, and some of that stuff is in the public domain. So what I've got here is the sole surviving recording that I made off of beautiful downtown Aurora Public Access back in 1997 of an episode of Burns and Allen, George Burns and Gracie Allen, and one of the early episodes that has fallen into the public domain. So it's also got a little bumper for the station before that, and it is a pretty 90s thing as far as the logo goes, but the style could have just as easily happened in the early 70s. So we're going to use that for a source, and, again, that would be at least plausible enough for the period. So the signal flow is as follows. We are going from the VCR to the via composite to the formerly PL259 input on this using a composite adapter, and PL259 with composite adapter out to just my little CRT TV. So then I had to add an extra step to the audio, which you've already seen and I'm not going to go over again. But I think we're just about ready to give this a shot. So once again, I'm not feeling tremendously optimistic about this, but let's give it a go. And something tells me I'm still going to have to play with that stupid pinch roller. So let's fire up the machine. We got signal. And let's see, I've got the tape a little intentionally over rewound. We'll just quickly put it into record mode so you can see that there is a signal. But yeah. All right, so wish me luck. Well, I did make it through the whole episode, or as much of it as there is. It turns out it's not quite complete, but it's real close. The tape just kind of stopped on me a couple of times, and there were times where I found myself having to manually force the pinch roller up against the capstan. So that's still an ongoing issue. And then the sound, I don't know if it was my VHS tape or the machine or the broadcast, but the sound shorted on me a few times. So there's some points where I'm riding the volume throughout the recording. But should we give it a shot? I've already rewound this to what I would guess amounts to 2 to 3 minutes back. So let's power the machine back on. Get it into forward mode. And I'm sure I'll have to encourage it a bit. Yeah, well, hey, something's there. How about that? I don't think I'm going to quite call it a success, but there's something there. It's semi-discernible. It actually clears up if I really ram the pinch roller. Maybe if I play with the tracking a bit. Yeah. You know, I'm kind of surprised that the quality is, for all intents and purposes, as good as it is. Certainly for the time and the fact that it's prosumer gear, at least. Yeah, I'm not calling this quite a success because it's still a little on the wonky side. That tracking is just all over the map. I can get to clear it momentarily and it just kind of jerks right back. But, yeah. So, what do you want to call that? Semi-success? So, I guess, I don't know, it's getting pretty late tonight. I don't know if I'll do any more record tests. But I know one thing's for sure. I'm going to have to hook up a time-based corrector and see if I can't rescue some of my own footage now. But I'm glad that the video head isn't totally shot like I feared. You never know. Yeah, so I think I'm going to call it a night for tonight and call it a semi-success. And I should also point out real quickly here, I haven't mentioned this, but the audio level is just always pinned to the red, whether the machine's on or off, no matter what the setting is. So something happened somewhere, and I haven't been able to get down in there to see if it's just stuck or who knows what happened. But yeah, a little bit of useless late night trivia there. Okay, let's close this sucker down for the night.
You're watching KACT TV, Channel 8.
I'm George Burns, Gracie Allen's husband. For the benefit of those who've never seen me before, I'm what is known in show business as a straight man. You know what a straight man is? I'll tell you. After the comedian gets through with a joke, I look at the comedian and then I look at the audience like this. Well, now I'd like you to see where Gracie and I live. That's our home. We live in Beverly Hills. That's the inside of our house. That's the outside right there. That hedge, Gracie planted that hedge. In the back, we have a garden.
I work out down. Gracie, what are you doing?
Will you carry these peaches? It's 12 o'clock.
What's that got to do with it?
Says right here, should serve from 2 to 4.
Do you know how to play Kleba?
No.
Oh, well, we can learn. Show us.
Sure.
Let's put our thing sound, Gracie.
Yeah, show us.
Houdini? What do you get out of this one?
Harry, we will make up the game that will drive them crazy.
I'm with you.
Get the chest.
Blanche?
Come on, we're going to play cards. Kleba is the
All
game.
right.
Give me 20,000.
He wins the game. Harry wins.
Oh, now wait just 1 minute. You lose. You renege.
He reneged?
Yes, you forgot to mention the spinning jack.
The spinning jack. Gracie, I'd like to talk to you. Do you know how to play Kleba?
Yes, it's just like Mogul.
Mogul? What is Mogul?
Well, don't you remember last week when you wanted to go to the ball game? You taught me how to play Mogul. Where do you want to go tonight, dear?
This is Bill Goodwin again to tell you that George and Gracie will be back with us in just a moment. On behalf of George and Gracie and all of us in the show, I want to say how happy we are to be officially a part of the great Carnation family.
I don't know, maybe there's somebody out there that does proper restorations of these things. And if there is, I'm sure I'm going to have to ship the unit off, and the shipping's going to be a real killer, but that just seems to be the thing. So, let me shift gears here for the ending. So, there was a stretch of, I guess it would have been 6 days during all this, that I had to put the AV-3600 on the back burner. And, I had to order belts and wait for them to show up. I needed to do the tape baking and all that. So I figured since I was going to have some downtime, I would take the opportunity to somewhat revise, but really just all around take another crack at one of my old songs. A song called Everybody's Got Their Own Ideas, which I first did back in 2006. But that one was initially supposed to be a full band electric rock, or at least folk rock sort of thing. But I had to very quickly, at the last second, recast it as this really, really spare acoustic number. And that was due to, as one would expect, time, budgetary, and personnel problems. So I have been working on that, and it's still not done. It still needs drums and possibly some other sweetening. But I also came up with another one of my little instrumental ditties, and so it fits in. So I decided to tie it into that old song, and now the whole thing's going to be this 10-minute chunk. But I guess I'll play a bit of that for you over the end credits. I mean, at least that sort of works without the drums. But when that is finished, it will hopefully find its way into the regular archive montage music sort of library. I really could have used that one for this episode. But otherwise, that is it for today's archive. Join me next time when, if the AV heavens will allow, it should be this year's Record Ripoffs episode.
having dizzy spells.
Oh, that's too bad. I've had those.
Oh, well, I guess I'm just lucky. I've never been dizzy.